I'm in the forests in Karnataka. We have come to this forest looking for tigers. We meet Professor Uma Ramakrishnan, a molecular ecologist. Professor Uma works on the fringes where humans encounter wild animals. In future, watching this space is very critical because zoonotic diseases or diseases which jump from wild animals to humans happens on those fringes. We are all too familiar with the Nipah virus and the SARS-CoV-2 virus. From tigers to saving Indians. I'm in the forest in Karnataka, a very rich area for tigers and wildlife. On this episode of Life and Science with Pallav Bagla, it's all about tiger ecology and tiger biology. We meet molecular ecologist Professor Uma Ramakrishnan. Namaskar, Uma.
Namaste.
Professor Uma works with the National Center for Biological Sciences and is very unique as she looks at tigers through the molecular periscope. But she also does work which is going to protect India against pandemics in future. Professor Uma, are we standing in what could be typical tiger, wildlife, elephant habitat?
Yes, quite close to here, tigers have been found, and there's elephants, leopards, sloth bears known to be here. And as you said, Karnataka, with its Western Ghats landscapes, has many tigers around us.
Dr. Uma, I have seen tigers many times in the wild. How did you decide to spend a lifetime researching tigers?
So I think I've always wanted to work on endangered species and use a molecular lens, use a genetic lens to understand more about them and inform their conservation. And soon after I started my job, I interacted with Ullas Karanth.
Yes.
And
The tiger man of Karnataka.
It just felt like a very good species because on one hand there was quite a bit of ecological information. For example, if I wanted to study fishing cat, we know almost nothing about it ecologically. So the molecular ecology becomes that much harder. But we know something about tiger ecology. And so it seemed like an ideal system undergoing fragmentation, undergoing human impacts, but at the same time also recovering to study. And being India's national animal, I felt that we must generate data on an endangered species so critically important to the country.
Let's go and see the work which you do in the forest, which is to collect stuff and then take it back into the laboratory. Let's go. Dr. Uma, are we seeing more fragmentation of tiger habitats, and what is the cause on the genetic structure of tigers?
So basically, fragmentation results in, if we have loss of habitat, loss of natural habitat, and we have either more development, high traffic roads and so on, all of these become barriers for tiger movement. So while we cannot stop development, we cannot stop kind of human impacts on landscapes, what we can try and understand with genetics is whether alternative versions of the future, alternative scenarios, different development scenarios, the road here versus the road here, how they may impact connectivity for tigers and ensuing probabilities of extinction of populations. And we can try and plan for a future which allows development or changes as well as biodiversity gains for tigers and other such
so what you're
species.
meaning is there should be more corridors between fragmented habitats?
Yes, we do need corridors. We still need to understand how animals use space and what a corridor means to an animal. But this is something we must invest in terms of management, in terms of landscape management for the future.
Dr. Uma studies tigers. In addition, she studies elephants, bats, and other animals. Let's go and take a look at some of the other work. So we encountered on the trail elephant dung. So Dr. Uma will show us how she collects DNA from elephant dung, and in a similar fashion, she also collects DNA from tigers and other animals. Kindly show us.
So first we wear gloves to ensure that we don't contaminate what we're collecting with our own DNA. So here's our sampling vial, and we're going to open it and then use this swab. Wet the swab
Okay.
and collect the upper layer only.
Okay.
Roll it on this upper layer. So basically, as the fecal material passes through the intestine, it pulls off cells, which are epithelial cells, and we want to capture just those as far as possible. We don't want to poke it inside to get the grass or the other stuff which is inside. And then I can do it once again. I'll just rinse it out a bit. And then again maybe sample the top part which looks relatively fresh. Put it back into the vial, snap this vial, close it, and then we're done.
So now the DNA is inside the
Yeah.
vial.
So just this much, which is about 1 ml of buffer, we'll take this back to the lab and we'll extract DNA from this liquid. And then it'll reveal all the secrets. We can find out about who this individual is, whether it's a male or a female, which population it's from, how inbred it is, whom it's related to, and many, many other secrets all hidden in the DNA.
And all of this is done in the wild,
Yeah.
even when you may encounter an elephant or a tiger nearby.
Yeah.
So you have to be very vigilant.
Yeah, yeah. And I have to label it because I don't want to go back to the lab and not know what it is. So I'm just going to label it E1, E01 for now. And here's my second vial for the second sample. So I'm basically going to write what species I think it is. It's elephant, the date and time, the scat condition, washed, collector's name, and the GPS location. So I have my GPS here. This is really important because when we do studies, for example, on connectivity, we have a scat or a DNA sample or a fecal sample tied to a GPS location. So here I'm going to enter my GPS location.
And this would also help you if you encounter the same animal at a different location.
Exactly. And this also goes in here so that we are sure that all the information about this sample is neatly put into one place. Of course, very importantly, I have to make sure I don't leave any trash. Pick up all of this stuff. This usually goes into another bag. And for now, I'm going to take off my gloves. I will not reuse these gloves because I could have touched
the
that dung, and I don't want to transfer that to the next sample that I collect.
So that is what molecular ecology is all about. DNA collected in the field, and now this DNA will go into the laboratory for further analysis. A marriage of traditional ecology with modern molecular biology. And that is what is molecular ecology. Let's explore that further in the laboratory. Having understood what tigers are like in the landscape and whether tigers in India are increasing or not, I am at the National Center for Biological Sciences, one of India's foremost laboratories. Dr. Uma, so you will show us tigers in test tubes?
Yeah, it seems funny to think about them that way. Tigers are so large and majestic, but all tigers like us have DNA in every single cell of their body, and we look at tigers, understand tigers through their DNA, which is really tiny, and that's why we use Eppendorf tubes, not even test tubes, to study them.
So let's go into the laboratory.
Sounds good?
We are inside the Tiger Molecular Biology Laboratory of Dr. Uma. This is where tigers in test tubes and tiger DNA is processed. Dr. Uma, how do you bring tigers into the laboratory here?
Yeah, it's quite funny to think about that, right? So basically, when we are in the field, we collect tiger scat. And for example, here,
Which is tiger droppings.
tiger droppings, yeah.
Now, tigers eat other prey. And in the scat, there would be more prey DNA than the DNA of the tiger. How do you separate that admixture?
Yeah, so that's a big question, and that's one of the biggest challenges of working with fecal samples or scat. In fact, if you just take an extract and you sequence it, less than 1% of the DNA there, the content is of tiger. So how do we zoom in on the tiger genetic information? This is a big challenge we face, and we basically use targeted approaches like PCR, where
Which is polymerase chain reaction.
polymerase chain reaction, where we are reading a word, say in the tiger genome, many times to get many copies of it. Now, the way we zoom in on a word is by using specific primers or words on either side of the word we're interested in, which go and hone in on the specific word we want to pull out of the tiger genome, which is a book in a sense.
Let's go and take a look at other aspects on the molecular biology of tigers. We are inside the wet laboratory of Dr. Uma Ramakrishnan. What does the molecular ecology of tigers reveal?
So that's something which, as you know, I've been working on for the last 15 years. And some answers we have. We understand a little bit about what the genetic landscapes or the genetically connected units of tigers are in India today. We've done work, a lot of work in central India, where we've investigated connectivity, and we've understood that overall connectivity is quite good, but certain landscape elements like high density human settlements or high traffic roads are the only ones which really impede tiger connectivity or don't allow tigers to move from one reserve to the other. More recently, with the genomic tools, we've been actually looking at isolated populations and what happens in these isolated populations. The work on connectivity, for example, enabled was one of the studies which allowed for petitioning for an underpass for this new NH7 in the Kanha-Pench corridor. So we don't want populations to become isolated, and we've recently been working on melanistic tigers. You can see a very nice painting in the background.
Melanistic means which is more black than...
Yeah, so they're not true melanic actually. A true melanistic individual is completely black. They're pseudo-melanistic in that they have a disruption in their patterns and they're more black than orange. But we find this particular phenotype or look of tigers only in Simlipal Tiger Reserve in Odisha. And this is potentially because tigers here have been isolated, and by chance, certain alleles, in this case, this mutation which causes this look, has increased in frequency. So, when we have a population fragmentation or small population size, in some cases, if those small populations are in a network of other large connected populations, like in central India, they may be recolonized, and there's a higher chance of those landscapes surviving in the future. But when you have small and isolated populations, like potentially Ranthambore or Simlipal Tiger Reserve, effects of drift or chance changes in allele frequencies or inbreeding kick in. So our interest in understanding tiger molecular ecology is to define populations, estimate abundance or the numbers of tigers sometimes just from DNA in these populations, look at whether these populations have high or low genetic variation, whether they are connected or not, and such understanding helps think about the future of these tiger populations.
You also study animal and human conflict. Tell me, how does molecular biology come into play there?
So it's like CSI, you know, anytime you have a crime, you have evidence of the crime and the criminal, right? So in this case, not to demonize it, but when tigers depredate livestock, when they kill livestock like cows, they bite at the jugular, they lick the prey. When they eat the prey, they scratch off their hair. So at any cattle kill by a tiger or a leopard, there's many tiger signs, biological material, which we can use to extract DNA and identify was it a tiger or not, which tiger was it, and so on. And accumulating this information over time and space allows us to then zone in on, are there problem individuals, or is it something to do with the distribution of cattle and so on and so forth. So how can we begin to address conflict with some data or evidence?
Dr. Uma, you also study other animals other than tigers?
Yeah. So for a long time we worked on Indian biogeography, trying to understand why species are where. We did some fascinating research in the Western Ghats on Shola or mountain birds, and also in
Shola
the Himalayas.
grasslands.
Shola grasslands. Yeah, Shola grasslands and forests. And we basically showed that the shape of the mountain drives speciation and diversification. So we expect to see more biodiversity when the mountain goes up and down than if it's relatively flat. More recently, we've been using molecular tools to look at other endangered species. We're working on elephants, sequencing elephant genomes to try and understand their populations. We're also looking at vultures, gyps vultures, which are critically endangered, trying to understand their diet, because, as you know, the reason they became endangered was because of the use of diclofenac, which is like crocin for cows. So as we are breeding and reintroducing vultures, we need to understand whether these reintroduced vultures are actually preying on wild prey or are they still eating livestock. Because while diclofenac is banned, it's still in use. So if indeed vultures are eating livestock and they are still using diclofenac, then it's again a risk for their survival.
When you talk of animals and you talk of humans, and India, it's a complete mosaic
Yes.
of landscapes where there are humans and there are animals and
Yes.
there are protected areas. Do you also work on emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases
Yes.
which come from forests, animals to humans?
Yes. So this is something which we've been doing the last 5 or so years. And it may seem quite distinct from, say, the tiger work, but basically it's two sides of the coin. You know, humans impact biodiversity. Some of them are negatively impacted, like endangered species, which become, holed in or sequestered into these protected areas. On the other hand, there's other biodiversity, which is really all around us, like bats and rodents, abundant and speciose mammals. Half of all mammals are rodents and bats. And this interface with this wildlife, bats and rodents, which is very strong in India, the edge is very strong, can result in a zoonosis or spillover of infections which they carry to humans. And we've all been through this the last year and a half with COVID-19, which is a zoonosis. So,
Which is the COVID-19 pandemic, and people believe that it emerged from bats and came into humans. And all of us are going through that. You're vaccinated, I am vaccinated, so we can be as safe as we can be. But understanding pandemics,
Yes.
is that part of your repertoire?
Yes. So, yeah, so basically, what we are trying to investigate are unknown pathogens. So, we look at these interfaces between wildlife and humans, whether it be plantations in the Western Ghats, we work in Kadumane, which is a tea plantation, or bat harvests in Northeast India. We're looking at what are the RNA viruses that bats carry, what are the bacteria that rodents carry, and we're trying to understand whether there's a chance or a risk of spillover of any of these potential pathogens. We're not sure they're pathogens, but potential.
What is your work on bats? Because bats are of immediate concern to everybody today.
So bats are really cool. They live very long for such a small animal, and they also carry many, many RNA viruses. They also
Of the same kind which caused, this is the SARS-CoV-2 which caused the pandemic.
Yes, yes. Coronavirus, for example, is is a generalist virus, and bats often carry several strains of coronavirus. They do carry these viruses, and at sometimes they shed these viruses. And if humans tend to interact with them or what they've shed at that time, there's a chance of humans contracting these viruses.
So this interface which you study is important for keeping India healthy?
I hope so. I think so. India is, as you said yourself, high biodiversity, high human population density, and high edge, high land use change. And this is what makes for high probability and high risk of spillover. So we need to map these interfaces and understand the risks before they become realized spillover events. That's what I'm interested in doing.
From tigers in test tubes, Dr. Uma has also sequenced the whole genome of tigers. Let's go and take a look at that. A tiger in the lab. Dr. Uma, have you sequenced the whole genome of India's national animal, the tiger? And what do we see here?
Yes. So the tiger genome is 2,400 million letters long, million base pairs long. So you can imagine that's a lot of DNA. And next generation sequencing, these new techniques, which all of us hear a lot about, including using this Illumina sequencer, allow us.
So this is a machine which would be used for sequencing.
Yes, tiger genome. So this is a HiSeq 2500 by Illumina, and these new technologies allow us to sequence whole genomes of even endangered and not so well studied species like tigers. And we have sequenced several tiger genomes now from across India. The most interesting one is that of Machli. She's one of the founders of Ranthambore.
What is this painting and what is special about it?
So this painting is really special to me because, as I said, we've worked a lot in Ranthambore. We've sequenced genomes of several tigers there, and we've used Machli's genome as a reference, to map other tiger genomes to look at whether they're variable or not, and whether those individuals are inbred or not. Tigers in Ranthambore are quite inbred because it's an isolated population, and our work on this will come out soon. But what you see here is not just a painting of Machli, but in her stripes etched is her real genome sequence.
Oh, you can see A, T, G, C, T.
So that's her real genome sequence. A painter was very kind enough to work with us over several months. We gave him the sequence. In Ranthambore, there's an art village, and we worked with him to get this painting. But this painting represents to me something really beautiful, that through reading DNA sequence, we can understand about the biology of tigers, and we hope that such understanding can help their conservation and survival in the future.
Thanks a lot for speaking to us, Dr. Uma.
Thank you.
A molecular ecologist saving tigers and also understanding pandemics for India. Thanks a lot for speaking to us.
Thank you.
From tiger landscapes to tigers in test tubes to the whole genome of tigers and this beautiful painting of Machli, the famous tigress from Ranthambore, whose whole genome was sequenced. This episode was all about understanding the molecular ecology of tigers and how tigers can be conserved, and more importantly, an understanding on how pathogens flow from wild animals to humans. Keep watching India Science.